He left her to chase after someone younger, someone more beautiful, and he believed he had erased her from his life forever. But in the midst of the lavish gala, surrounded by hundreds of glittering crystal chandeliers and the delicate chime of champagne glasses, he froze in place. Standing before him was his ex-wife Sophia, the woman he had once broken, now carrying his child, radiant to the point that the entire room couldn't help but turn and look. There were no more tears, no more pleading, only a single gaze, sharp and unyielding, that told him everything he needed to know. This story was far from over. That night, the Grand Herald Hotel looked as if someone had sprinkled glitter over every inch of its ornate moldings. From the soaring ceilings, baccarat crystal chandeliers poured down a light that made everything from champagne flutes to polite smiles glimmer more than reality itself. Men wore solid gold cufflinks. The women draped themselves not in mere names but in brands: Chanel, Oscar de la Renta, Carolina Herrera. It wasn't a party. It was an unspoken ritual of the upper crust where reputation was worn like a second layer of perfume. And then he appeared, as if directed to enter at the exact moment every eye in the room needed an anchor. Ryan Caldwell, the man of billion-dollar deals and divorces worth nearly as much. Jet black tuxedo, Windsor knotted tie in flawless symmetry, platinum Rolex flashing on his wrist. He didn't walk into the room, he claimed it. Beside him was Elena, blonde waves cascading over a body-hugging red gown, as if she just stepped out of an Italian wine ad. She smiled with half her lips and half a calculation, as though checking the ROI on every gaze that landed on her. With statuesque height and sharply sculpted cheekbones, she was ambition made flesh, a living jewel in the world Ryan had built from perfect control. Everything seemed on script. A power couple, a prestigious night, a ballroom packed with people yet empty of feeling. But life doesn't follow the soundtrack you expect, and sometimes it plays a song you thought you'd forgotten. Sophia appeared without warning. She didn't enter with commotion. She didn't try to command attention. But like the first snow of winter, you don't hear it fall, you just find yourself looking up. An ivory gown, floor length, hand-embroidered in silver thread and speckled with crystals as small as dew, floated around her like a mist wrapping the mother who carried a tiny life inside. Nothing loud, only a silence weighted with meaning as she moved through the room. Her rounded belly shimmered beneath silk, like a secret carried with pride, no hiding, no apology. She was no longer Ryan Caldwell's ex-wife. She was a woman present for no one but herself. And the whole room knew it. So did Ryan. He hadn't seen her at first, maybe because he never expected her to come, or maybe because he thought he had filed her away in some locked drawer of memory, key discarded. But when his gaze swept the room, when the air around him suddenly thickened, he sensed the shift before he actually saw her. And then he saw her. In that instant, something in him slackened like a bowstring that had been pulled taut for too long. The suit felt heavier by several pounds. His heart skipped a beat. She looked straight ahead, unhurried. Her eyes didn't search, but her presence forced him to face her, and that was something Ryan was not good at, facing things. Beside him, Elena kept smiling, her hand moving just enough to show off the Cartier diamond bracelet on her wrist. She either knew nothing or knew far too much and chose not to ask. But she felt the faint contraction in his hand where hers rested, a sign, a crack. The clink of champagne glasses, the gentle tuning of the string section, it all went on. But somewhere, a few heads turned, a few whispers fell like light rain. Sophia, the woman once forgotten, once assumed to have retreated from the social stage, now stood there, quiet and magnificent, as if she had never left at all. Ryan swallowed not from dryness, but because the lump in his throat was made of memories and of the hollow look in her eyes, more startling than any glare or trace of regret. In his palm, Elena was motionless, but in the air something had shifted course. No one spoke, no one needed to, because the things left unsaid are often the ones that echo the longest. Ryan felt a cold current shoot down his spine. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? Not everyone who walks into a room can alter its gravity, but Sophia could. She stood at the edge of the ballroom, where the shimmer of crystal chandeliers only just grazed her shoulders, enough for the gentle curves of her ivory gown to catch the light like morning mist. Others might see her stillness as quiet, but it was not shyness. It was a confident presence, fully aware she didn't need to stand in the center to be seen. A year ago, she had slipped out of this space through a side door, her heart shredded like a pillow torn apart. Tonight, she returned not to reclaim anything, but to remind herself she had never truly vanished. Everything she had lost, love, identity, even pieces of herself she hadn't tried to patch back together, she rebuilt, from the ground up. Like when she returned to yoga class and felt her lungs fill fully for the first time after months of numbness. Like when her hand first touched a paintbrush and she let watercolor bleed across the paper like the beautiful fractures of memory. Or when she began organizing free career workshops for single mothers, an idea born on a cold afternoon as she peeled an apple and thought, this pain must mean something. She hadn't painted a new person. She had simply peeled away the layers she'd once wrapped around herself to fit someone else, someone who had called her calm in a busy world, yet left her to chase a storm draped in a red silk dress. And now, in the very room that once belonged to him, Sophia stood with the child growing peacefully inside her, not as a reminder, but as a beginning. The gown she chose wasn't a declaration, yet every stitch, every tiny crystal sewn into her cuff, every detail so fine it could go unnoticed, was the resilience of a woman who knew her own worth. Even pregnant, her posture was straight. Not out of pride, but from a self-respect that had been forged and tempered. She remembered early mornings alone, waking before dawn to sit by the window, palm resting on her belly, murmuring affirmations, a ritual against the ever-present hum of anxiety. She wasn't sure what kind of mother she would be, but she was certain of one thing. Her child would not grow up in a world where its mother felt the need to apologize for existing. She had once loved Ryan so deeply, she'd lost the line between we and I. But now, that divorce, once the ultimate loss, was the gift no one dared give her, the chance to meet herself again. In Sophia's mind, there was no sad soundtrack playing as she entered this room, no all too well, no someone like you, only silence and the steady heartbeat beneath her palm. Some recognized her, a few tilted their heads, unsure how to greet the pregnant ex-wife, but she didn't care. Not because she was cold, but because she no longer needed anyone's gaze to confirm she existed. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt free in the very space that had once made her feel small. She didn't seek Ryan. She didn't scan the crowd. She didn't avoid him, either. She let everything unfold the way the universe always does, quietly, logically, and without asking permission. And then his eyes found her, pulled, it seemed, by a gravity opposite of what he'd once wanted. There was no smile on her lips, no anger in her eyes, only a look, gentle, clear, almost peacefully unnerving. She wasn't waiting for a reaction. She didn't want to resurrect anything. She was no longer the delicate wife left behind. She was a mother moving forward. And in that moment, perhaps for the first time in his life, Ryan didn't know who he was looking at. Was she the wife he had once loved? Or a new woman born from the very wound he had left? The question went unanswered, but its echo lingered in the room like a wall of glass. As Ryan's gaze swept over Sophia, he no longer saw the fragile wife. He saw someone fully capable of erasing the version of himself he once believed to be true. There are moments when an entire room pauses, and no one realizes they've been holding their breath. The movement doesn't vanish, but it slows like the air has thickened. Music still drifts from the string ensemble in the distance. Champagne glasses still glint beneath the chandelier light. Conversations still carry on. Yet everything feels as though it's inside a glass tank, where echoes are muffled and light grows quiet. Ryan turned his head. It wasn't the kind of turn meant to be noticed. It wasn't deliberate. It wasn't theatrical. It was simply a reflex. But in that subtle beat, every sense he had seemed to awaken at once. He saw her. And for a moment that stretched longer than reality allowed, he forgot everything, the half-finished deals, the six-figure watch on his wrist, and even the woman standing beside him. Elena noticed. Her hand, once resting on his arm with practiced grace, tightened not from jealousy, but from instinct. She didn't know exactly what had just happened, but she felt it. Something old, familiar, and dangerous had entered his line of sight. Sophia didn't look right away. She wasn't in a hurry. Instead, she moved through clusters of people absorbed in their cocktails and Wall Street lace conversations. The ivory gown followed her with each step, not ostentatious, but enough to make people wonder, who is she? A pregnant woman is often met with soft, almost pitying eyes. But no one dared pity Sophia tonight. She radiated an energy that made people unconsciously straighten their posture when she was near. It wasn't forced power, it was a calm that stirred unease in others. And then, their eyes met. No words, no nod, no clear sign of recognition, but something passed through the air. Ryan wanted to say something, something light enough not to make a sound, but strong enough to reach her. Yet he had no idea where to begin. Words that once came easily now caught in his throat. Sophia wasn't searching for anything in his gaze. She expected no apology, needed no explanation. Only a faint smile so slight it almost didn't exist, lifted at the corner of her lips. Not forgiveness. Not mockery, but a message. I have walked through the storm, and now I stand steady. For Ryan, that was harder to swallow than any accusation. He had once known Sophia as gentle, delicate, sometimes so patient it felt as though she had no boundaries of her own. She had been the one waiting for him after late meetings, the one quietly cleaning up the emotional messes he left unnamed, the one who loved him more than she loved herself. And now she stood there with life growing inside her, with a serene gaze, and with an energy that made the entire room lean subtly in her direction. Ryan realized something he didn't want to admit. Sophia was no longer an ex-wife. She had become a symbol to him not of love lost, but of something he would never have again. Elena, though silent, kept her eyes sharp. She knew she had just been compared not to another woman but to a version of the man beside her she had never seen before. Unsettled, wordless, and worst of all, moved. Amid distant laughter, the clink of ice against glass, and the noisy toasts, there was a hollow space between Ryan and Sophia, a space no light could fill. Only silence, and memories that had never been spoken aloud. A waiter passed by, the tray of wine shifting gently in his hand, and the distance broke. Sophia turned away first, not hurried, not regretful. Like someone closing a chapter she had no intention of rereading, even if someone else was still flipping the pages. Ryan stood there, eyes still tracing her path through the crowd, but he knew. He had just lost something he once believed was always his. No explosion, no tears. But everyone understood a quake had just struck, without bringing down a single wall. Between that gaze and that distance, a story untold had begun to rise, and the entire ballroom seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the first line. Not every powerful declaration needs to be spoken aloud. Some are delivered through a single glance, a single step, or a single dance. Sophia hadn't planned on stepping onto the dance floor tonight. She had once believed that if she spun under those curious, half-mocking stares, she would feel as fragile as glass. But she discovered that the most fragile thing was not exposure, it was silence. The kind of silence that had bound her for years, as the wife of a man who no longer truly saw her. Lucas appeared like a quiet ripple across a lake stretched tight. He hadn't changed much, his hair still tousled as if a studio breeze had just passed through, his shirt creased in that deliberate, only an artist thinks this is fashion way. But his eyes were different, clear, respectful, and free of even the faintest trace of pity. He stepped forward, hand extended, no verbal invitation, but Sophia understood. It wasn't a romantic waltz, nor a bid for attention. It was a small nod to the journey she had made. A simple act, yet it shifted the balance of the entire room. Sophia placed her hand in his. For a heartbeat, she felt the hesitation in herself, like stepping out of the last layer of armor. But then her body began to move, fluid to the music, and everything else fell away. The music poured into her like a warm current. Not the exuberance of a traditional ballroom tune, but a gentle rhythm, like waves brushing against the morning shore, unhurried, quiet, yet steady and enveloping. Her white gown opened and closed around her with each turn, like a late blooming flower. She was no longer a woman trying to come back. She was a woman who had crossed through and now simply existed without apology. Lucas didn't lead with dominance. He stepped back, she advanced. She retreated, he turned. A silent conversation, in which Sophia answered with every step, "I am here. Not to be acknowledged, but to acknowledge myself." From across the room, a few eyes began to turn toward them. At first curious, then admiring? Perhaps. Women in couture leaned toward one another, whispering not about her but about how she looks different. Not in the cutting way, but with a reserved kind of respect. And Ryan watched. Not as before, with hurried, grasping eyes searching for something old and lost. This time, he watched as though he were outside his own story, a supporting character in a scene he no longer directed. Elena stood beside him, cocktail glass in hand, smile fixed as if glued to her lips. She had everything a perfect woman in Ryan's eyes once possessed. Yet in this moment, she felt herself fading, like the last light of day when the sun chooses to shine on someone else. Sophia turned. Not quickly, not urgently, but something in that motion made the entire room seem to still. She wasn't trying to shine, yet she glowed. Lucas smiled, the kind of smile that asked for no validation. He didn't dance to claim the spotlight, nor to possess the moment. He was simply a companion in her rebirth, a man who didn't want to lead, only to make sure she never felt alone on her new path. And Sophia knew it. For the first time in so long, her feet felt light. Not because of the pregnancy, not because of the eyes on her, but because the weight she had carried in her heart was no longer a sentence. It was a root, a foundation. The thing that had brought her here, to this exact moment. She turned beneath the golden light, her gown moving like a ribbon adrift in the wind. Ryan, standing not far away, watched her as though seeing himself, once the man who filled every inch of a room, now edged to the side, eclipsed by the very woman who had once lived in his shadow. And perhaps, in that moment, he understood. True power does not lie in the spotlight, in applause, or in the youthful arm draped beside you. It lies in the absolute stillness of someone who has been hurt, yet has never once fallen. As she turned beneath the golden lights, Ryan saw himself not the man he thought he was, but a man diminished by the radiance of the very person who had once been his victim. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. At every high society gathering, there's a strange moment when everything appears perfectly in place, champagne glasses still full, music still flowing, laughter still on cue, yet you feel yourself standing just half a beat out of sync with the rest of the room. For Elena, that moment came faster than she expected. She was not easily shaken. Raised in a Greek family under the creed, if you can't control where people look, learn to control your own smile. Elena had mastered the art of composure as a weapon. But tonight, that mask cracked. She felt it the instant Sophia spun beneath the lights, her ivory gown flaring softly like a gentle dare. No noise, no intention. Yet Elena knew the eyes were drifting away from her, not just Ryan's, Sophia's, the whole room's. Her hand reached to adjust her dress strap without thought, a habit that surfaced whenever she felt threatened. The cocktail glass was still cool against her skin, but her fingers no longer held it with the ease of a perfect accessory. She smiled, the kind she reserved for when paparazzi caught her off guard. But this time, her lips trembled, and no camera lens was there to capture it. Ryan was different. He didn't hide it. From the moment Sophia began moving to the music, he had almost stopped hearing anyone at the wine table. Talk of investments, expansion deals, and compliments about his influence all faded, like a radio station slipping out of range. He eased himself from the crowd, not in haste, but with certainty. Like a man pulled toward something he had lost long before he realized he'd ever possessed it. Elena tracked him from the corner of her eye. She needed no special skill to see it. Ryan was no longer there, at least not emotionally. And what unsettled her most wasn't jealousy, it was helplessness. She had thought she had won. She was younger, more alluring, less demanding. She knew how to speak at the right moment, laugh at the right line, and hold silence at the right beat. But now, she stood there, beautiful as an elegant showpiece, and felt invisible. Sophia, meanwhile, didn't look at Ryan nor at Elena. She simply stepped off the dance floor with Lucas, the friend Elena didn't know by name, with a lightness that was almost airborne. There was nothing extravagant in her gown, no diamonds blazing from her skin, yet Sophia drew the eye not because she wanted to, but because she didn't need to. Elena drew in a deep breath. She turned to an older woman, perhaps the wife of a bank CEO or an art collector, and, unable to stop herself, murmured, "She's still beautiful, but it's like she's not the woman we used to know." The woman beside her gave a small nod, but said nothing, because it wasn't a question, it was an admission. Across the room, Ryan stood alone, his hands hung loose, his tie slightly slack, and his gaze still locked on Sophia. But what stunned him wasn't that she had changed, it was that the entire world around him seemed to notice it at the very same moment he did. And worse still, they welcomed it with an admiration he no longer held for himself. Reputation had been Ryan's crown. Every gala, every interview, every photograph with the famous was another stone in the empire bearing his name. But tonight, he felt that empire shift not because of a richer rival, but because of a woman who had once been the one behind. The tension in the room wasn't born of argument or conflict. It came from changes so small they almost escaped notice: the redirection of glances, the pause in mid-conversation, and the rising presence of Sophia, not as an ex-wife, but as a version of herself everyone suddenly wanted to be near. In that moment, Elena understood something youth had never taught her. True light doesn't need to claim every eye. It only needs to shine at the right moment. And the rest of the world will turn on its own. Every party has its curtain call, not with the toll of a bell, but with a quiet settling, as if the room itself understands the peak has passed. The crystal lights dimmed to a softer glow, the wine drained slowly from the glasses, and the piano's notes eased into a farewell that never needed words. Guests began to drift away in small clusters, wearing their polite smiles like lightweight coats. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. Something had shifted tonight, not a scandal, not a shock, but a change of season within the heart. Sophia stepped out onto the terrace behind the grand hall. It wasn't crowded, just the sound of the night wind and the faint flickering gold of city lights far away, breathing like the afterglow of a long dream. She leaned lightly against the marble railing, her hand resting on her belly, not to hide, but to connect. A small gesture, carrying the weight of an entire chapter of her life. Lucas followed, silent, as if he understood that presence can sometimes matter more than words. He said nothing, simply drew a shawl from his coat pocket and draped it over her shoulders, not because he feared she was cold, but as a way of honoring the performance just ended. The quiet triumph of a soul finding its way back to itself. They stood there without speaking. In that stillness, Sophia could hear her own life not existing, not surviving, but living true to the self and the worth she had pieced back together, one fragment at a time, after being broken. She turned, her gaze drifting back through the glass doors into the hall where Ryan stood near the entrance. He was no longer the man of grand statements, no longer the commanding gaze that owned the room, no longer the figure who possessed. Now he was just a solitary man inside the very world he had built, facing the emptiness he had left behind in others. Sophia felt no hate, no pity. She looked at him with a peace hard won, the kind not easily claimed when your heart has been torn apart by that same person. There was no mockery, no victory in her eyes, because she didn't need victory. What she needed was herself and the small life growing within her to walk their own path without retracing anyone's steps. Ryan seemed to feel that look. He lifted his head slightly, their eyes meeting one last time that night. No words passed between them, but Sophia knew he understood. It wasn't that he had lost her. It was that she had chosen to leave not in anger, not in resentment, but in the quiet awakening of someone who no longer wished to exist in a story that no longer belonged to her. Lucas tilted his head, as if sensing the ending drifting gently toward them. "What now?" he asked, his voice soft as a passing breeze. Sophia didn't answer right away. She took a long breath, letting the night air slip through her hair, then nodded, her eyes fixed on the lights in the distance. "I'm going to write a book about love, about the fractures, and about the woman born from the hurt." There was no applause, no spotlight, just the whisper of someone who had come to understand deeply that a true story never really ends at a party. She didn't return to the grand hall, not out of fear, not to avoid anything, but because she had moved on. And once you've moved forward, there's no reason to go back. The car was waiting beyond the gates, headlights cutting through the thin veil of mist. She walked toward it, each step slow, yet steady, as though leaving behind an old chapter to write a new one. The night wind brushed her lips, not salty, not sweet, but something that felt like freedom. She was not an ex-wife, not a victim. She was a woman carrying a life, a story, a future needing no label to be acknowledged. Behind her, the party still hadn't fully gone dark. But for Sophia, the real light was no longer in that room. It was burning ahead, where her story would be told, not in tears, but in freedom, compassion, and a new kind of faith. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. 3 months into her pregnancy, Isabella Reed had grown accustomed to her husband Adrian Cross, treating her like nothing more than a display piece at lavish parties. But tonight, at the multi-million-dollar tech launch, the line was crossed. He slapped her right there in front of his mistress and the entire press corps. As the sting still burned on her cheek, a single, crystal-clear decision rang through her mind. If he was going to destroy her life, then she would burn to the ground the dark AI empire he had built through deceit. This was no longer just a story about a slap. It was a war to reclaim her voice. The brilliant glow of hundreds of LED lights flooded the grand hall of the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Outside, limousines lined up bumper to bumper, and groups of guests in tuxedos and evening gowns streamed in, as if this were the Oscars rather than a technology launch. In the corner of the room, a massive screen projected the Neural Edge logo alongside the words, "Shaping Tomorrow's Mind," a slogan grand enough to make any investor smile with satisfaction. Adrian Cross was at the center of it all. His perfectly tailored suit hugged his shoulders, the textbook CEO smile fixed in place. He shook hands, laughed, nodded, moving, as if everyone in the room were an old friend. And perhaps, considering the money they had poured into Neural Edge, they had earned that kind of friendliness from him. A few meters away, Isabella Reed stood near the champagne bar, her hand resting lightly on her stomach, a subconscious gesture she made whenever she needed to remind herself she was pregnant. Over the past 3 months, she had perfected the art of smiling through evenings like this, wearing silk gowns worth more than a month's rent, adorned with jewelry chosen to be not too dazzling, yet not too modest. Just enough to remind people she was Mrs. Adrian Cross, but never enough to overshadow the tech star standing in the spotlight. From her vantage point, Isabella spotted Ava Sinclair. The young woman wore a form-fitting black dress, standing closer to Adrian than etiquette required. Ava's fingers brushed lightly against his arm as she laughed, her eyes lighting up in the way women's eyes often do when they want to leave an impression. Isabella had heard the whispers, former colleagues sending her warning texts, a PR staffer letting something slip, but tonight no one needed to say a word. That unhidden intimacy confirmed everything. The presentation began. Adrian stepped onto the stage to a booming cinematic score, speaking about the future of artificial intelligence, about how Neural Edge would unlock the limitless potential of the human mind. The audience nodded. Scribbled notes, a few even live-streamed on the spot. Isabella wasn't catching every word. In her ears was the chaotic murmur of her own mind, The dinners he'd missed, the urgent business trips, the phone calls that ended the second she walked into the room. Tonight, all the pieces snapped together too perfectly. She moved up a few steps along the side aisle toward the stage, her steps so light no one noticed. As Adrian paused for applause, she drew close enough to murmur just for him to hear. "How long have you and her been together?" In that moment, it felt like the sound had been sucked out of the room. The CEO's smile vanished, his eyes darkened, sending a cold, slicing current through the air. Then, before anyone could process what was happening, Adrian's hand whipped upward. The crack rang through the hall, not the sound of any groundbreaking tech, but the dry, brutal contact of skin on skin. A ripple of shock swept the audience. Phones that had been live streaming his speech now swung instantly toward them, recording every frame. A guest in the front row gasped. Somewhere in the back, someone let out a disbelieving whistle. Isabella didn't shed a tear. She simply placed her hand against her cheek, still hot from the sting, and stood tall. Without a word, she turned and walked away. Each step matched the pounding of her heart, not from physical pain, but from what she knew was about to come next. Behind her, Adrian carried on with his speech, his voice strained as if he had simply cleared his throat a bit too forcefully. Some guests pretended nothing had happened. No one wanted to tarnish the golden night of the tech industry, but the smartphone cameras didn't pretend. They captured everything, sending it to the internet faster than any internal neural edge network could ever dream. She walked down the hallway, the green neon glow of the Neural Edge logo casting light across her face. To the people at the exit, she was still the woman in the elegant sapphire blue gown. But inside, the masks had already begun to crack. This slap was not merely a public humiliation, it was a turning point. Because in her mind, a plan had just been set in motion. It wasn't just about Adrian, or Ava, or the affair. It was about everything she had quietly observed, logged, and stored away over the past year, data that, if revealed, could shake not just Neural Edge, but the massive corporations silently feeding off its power. Outside, the music of the event still played, glasses clinked, and counterfeit laughter filled the air. Inside Isabella, there was only the stillness of the storm's eye. Adrian's slap had given her, quite by accident, a gift, the perfect reason to break her silence. She knew that once she walked out of this building, nothing would ever be the same. And strangely enough, that thought brought the faintest curve to her lips, a small smile, but enough to keep her spine straight. The night wind in Nob Hill was so cold it seemed even the glass towers shivered. Isabella walked briskly along the stone-paved sidewalk, her high heels stripped of the pride they carried when she had first stepped into the Neural Edge launch. In her handbag were only a few items: a wallet, a phone, a passport, and an external hard drive, the only possession she truly considered valuable. Each step felt like it was pulling her farther away from the image of the perfect wife Adrian had so carefully designed over the years. Behind her, the penthouse still glowed with light. Adrian was probably still surrounded by a forest of people, continuing his performance, pretending that the slap had been nothing more than a passing breeze. He had always been gifted at turning a storm into clear skies so long as the spotlight stayed fixed on him. Isabella knew that if she stayed another hour, she'd be swept right back into the cycle of apologies, lavish gifts, and promises he never kept. Mia Alvarez's apartment sat in a red brick building in the Mission District, where the elevator had a habit of stalling on the third floor and the doorbell screamed like a fire alarm. When the door opened, the smell of buttered popcorn and the soft hum of jazz spilled out. Mia didn't ask a thing. She simply pulled Isabella inside and wrapped her in a soft cotton blanket. "I have ice cream," Mia said, as if vanilla ice cream could fix every marriage problem, but at the very least it made Isabella feel a little warmer. That night she slept on a sofa that sagged slightly in the middle, a welcome change from the wide empty bed in Nob Hill, where the silence between two people had always been far more terrifying than any argument. The next morning, San Francisco woke under a gray sky and the scent of freshly roasted coffee. When Isabella opened her eyes, she saw Mia in the kitchen, toasting bread while talking on the phone. "They're on their way," Mia said, setting a glass of orange juice beside her. "Your parents will be here in a few hours." The flight from Seattle landed before noon. Among the stream of people emerging from the arrival gate, Isabella instantly spotted her father Thomas, tall and lean. His silver hair stood out in the crowd, and his blue eyes were still as sharp as the days he wrote lines of code. Beside him, her mother Linda pulled a suitcase with one hand and reached for her daughter with the other. When Linda embraced her, she didn't ask, "What happened?" She simply held her tight, as if afraid that letting go would cause Isabella to vanish into smoke. Thomas stood beside them, one hand on his daughter's shoulder, his eyes saying without words that he had seen this moment coming for a long time. Back at Mia's apartment, they sat around the small kitchen table. Linda poured chamomile tea, the steam fogging her glasses. Her voice was slow, as if unlocking a memory long sealed. "I once lived in a beautiful apartment, with a view of the bay, with a husband who thought I was software to be controlled." She gave a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because the memory no longer had the power to wound her. He never yelled. He just muted me, little by little. Thomas remained silent, his gaze shifting from his wife to his daughter, as if to say, "Your mother walked through fire, so you'd know this road isn't the only one." Linda spoke of the morning she packed her things, left that apartment, and went to stay with an old friend. No plan, only the resolve that life would never be the same again. "You're stronger than you think," Linda said, placing her warm hand over Isabella's. "And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is start over." The words lingered in the air. Isabella looked down at her teacup, the steam blurring her mother's face. But the heat she felt wasn't from the tea, it was from a will quietly sparking to life. Across the room, Mia pretended to be busy with her laptop, but she was listening. Every so often, she glanced at Isabella, as if to remind her that friends are sometimes the backup drives of family, ready to reboot you when your system freezes. Outside the window, a bus rolled past, bearing a Neural Edge ad with Adrian's confident smile. Isabella didn't look away. For the first time in months, she stared directly at that image without feeling small. Last night's slap hadn't just shoved her out of a marriage, it had pushed her into a battle she had never believed she was strong enough to win. But now, with her family beside her and a secret in her hands, she knew she was no longer the woman standing silently at the champagne bar. She was going to act. Late afternoon in San Francisco, the sky wore a muted layer of silver, light filtering through the skyscrapers in long streaks. The rented SUV rolled to a stop in front of the Nob Hill penthouse. Isabella sat in the back seat, her hand gripping the strap of her handbag as if holding on to the only ticket out of captivity. Her parents flanked her. Thomas's eyes swept the street like a radar scanning for movement, while Linda reviewed a handwritten checklist in a small notebook, as if they were executing a covert CIA mission. Mia sat in the driver's seat, wearing a strangely calm smile, the kind you only see on someone well-practiced in raiding an ex's house to rescue clothes. The building was so quiet that the click of Isabella's high heels echoed down the hallway like drum beats leading into battle. The keycard still worked. The door swung open, releasing the familiar scent of the luxury candles Adrian loved, though to Isabella now, it smelled like the perfume of a mask, hiding something rotten beneath. The plan was simple. Get in fast, take what was needed, leave before anyone noticed. Linda went straight to the bedroom to gather essential personal belongings. Thomas stayed near the front door, phone in hand like a sentry. Mia headed directly for the study, Adrian's territory, which he always kept locked when he wasn't home. The glossy walnut desk gleamed with a kind of lifeless perfection, but Isabella knew the real pulse of Neural Edge beat within its hidden folders. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out a slim wooden box. The familiar combination lock was set to her birthday. Adrian had never imagined she'd one day use it against him. Inside lay a black external hard drive, old but immaculately kept. Once it connected to her personal laptop, the screen lit up with folders named in the most innocuous way: project, garden, vacation, notes, recipes. But Isabella knew in the tech world, the cute labels were often where the most dangerous secrets lived. Opening project, garden revealed hundreds of screenshots, emails, and Neural Edge system logs. Each file was a fragment of a much larger picture. The AI wasn't just collecting user data, it was silently replicating content and ideas from small startups, restructuring them, and selling them to massive corporate clients for hundreds of times the original value. She scrolled quickly through the files. One internal log showed the AI had fully recreated a mental health app in just 48 hours, using data it had accidentally harvested from the original company's server. Adrian's so-called tech revolution was, in reality, a systematic cloning machine disguised behind grand launches and visionary speeches. In another drawer, she found a thick financial dossier. The spreadsheets detailed transactions worth hundreds of millions of dollars funneled into anonymous trusts through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The faint trails of these funds vanished into a legal maze, but with her investigative journalist's eye, Isabella recognized it instantly. This wasn't tax optimization. This was money laundering on a global scale. Outside the study, Mia appeared holding another stack of documents, her eyes wide. "You won't believe this. He's got signed contracts selling user data to a political marketing firm." Isabella gave a small nod, but inside, each new piece of evidence only darkened the picture further. Before leaving, she looked around the room one last time. This had once been the place where Adrian worked through the night, where he promised he would change the world. Now Isabella could see he had changed the world just in a way no one would ever want. The hard drive sat in her bag like a ticking bomb. What it contained wasn't just enough to destroy Adrian's reputation, it could shake the foundations of every corporation that had partnered with Neural Edge. She drew in a deep breath, feeling the weight of her choice. This was no longer about marriage, no longer about personal betrayal. This was a tech conspiracy that stretched far beyond the limits of ethics, and she, a betrayed wife, stood at its very center. Before closing the door, Isabella paused for a moment. She left an old business card of hers on the desk, a small gesture, as if to say the game now had a new player. They left the penthouse carrying secrets powerful enough to rattle Silicon Valley. Outside, night had fallen, and the city lights blinked like endless lines of running code. Isabella knew that every byte of data in her bag could be the fatal blow to an empire that once seemed untouchable. The message appeared in Isabella's encrypted inbox at 2 a.m. Just a short line. "I need to see you. Privately." The address that followed led to a small cafe tucked deep in the Mission District, where the dim yellow light was just enough to turn every face into a mystery. That morning, San Francisco lay beneath a thin veil of fog, like a sheer scarf draped over the city. Isabella stepped inside. The door chime gave a soft ring, and the scent of hand-roasted coffee and warm waffles drifted out to greet her. In the farthest corner, Ava Sinclair was already waiting. Her hair was tied back neatly, and the confident spark she had on stage at Neural Edge's launch was gone. In its place was something else, fatigue laced with worry, as if she had been standing too long on a tightrope strung between two high-rises. Ava didn't waste words. Her voice dropped low, each syllable measured. Adrian hadn't just betrayed Isabella in love. He had used Ava as a shield, a courier, to move secret data out of Neural Edge's system, legitimizing transactions that, if exposed, would draw the attention of entire governments. Isabella listened, fingers tightening around her coffee cup. She had once thought of Ava as nothing more than the other woman, but now, the picture was far more complicated. Ava was a pawn too. The only difference was that she knew she was being played, and now she wanted to switch sides. The deal was struck quickly. Ava would provide access to Neural Edge's internal servers, files so sensitive that even senior executives didn't know they existed. In return, Isabella would ensure Ava a legal way out before Adrian realized her betrayal. Mia acted as the bridge, reaching out to Jordan Hale, a renowned tech attorney famous for taking down data giants by exploiting the very legal systems they believed would protect them. Jordan arrived that afternoon, carrying a slim laptop and the sharp-eyed look of someone who had long lived in a world where information was currency. In Mia's apartment, 3 women and 1 lawyer sat around the table. Ava opened her laptop, typing a long string of characters like the password to an entire bank. The screen lit up with a labyrinth of folders, but Jordan's eyes immediately found the anomaly. A parallel server, a shadow copy of Neural Edge's official system. What filled the screen plunged the room into silence. This shadow AI was not bound by any ethical constraints. It could replicate human voices with near-perfect accuracy, generate deepfake videos so convincing that even detection tools couldn't spot them. And most importantly, It was being sold to financial and political organizations in multiple countries. The goal was not to serve communities, but to manipulate markets, steer public opinion, and sometimes sabotage rivals. Isabella watched as contract numbers and pricing tables appeared. A test clip sat on the server, a fabricated speech from a well-known senator, calling for cuts to the national defense budget, completely fictitious, yet so real that if aired, it could send the stock market into chaos within minutes. Jordan leaned back in his chair, the corner of his mouth curling upward. If this leaks, Adrian doesn't just lose neural edge, he loses his freedom. His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed the excitement of a man who had just found his ace card. A flicker of humor passed through the tension when Mia murmured, "Well, if Adrian likes playing tech god, I'm sure he'll love seeing himself on the front page, under the crime section." The remark drew a quiet laugh from Ava, a rare sound in the heavy air. But the moment of levity was short-lived. Ava knew that from this instant the clock had started ticking. Neural Edge was a digital fortress, and Adrian would notice the breach the moment someone slipped through a door he thought was locked. Isabella looked at Ava, then at Jordan. A fragile thread of trust had just formed between three people who had no real reason to believe in one another. But they all understood. To take Adrian down, they had to keep this plan absolutely secret, at least until the final piece of the puzzle was in place. Outside, San Francisco hummed on, electric cars gliding past like endless lines of code. But in the small apartment in the Mission District, an unlikely alliance had been forged not from friendship or loyalty, but from a single, shared goal: to pull Adrian Cross off the tech throne he had built on a foundation of deceit. Isabella knew the next step would no longer be about gathering evidence. Now it was time to calculate the strike. The rumors began like scattered raindrops, but within days, they had swelled into a full-blown storm across the tech news world. From anonymous blogs to major New York publications, the headlines multiplied. Neural Edge, accused of data breaches and intellectual theft. Shadow AI, a new threat to global markets. Adrian responded in true veteran Silicon Valley CEO fashion by staging a grand press conference. The venue was a gleaming convention center in Palo Alto, the backdrop emblazoned with the Neural Edge logo and the slogan, "Transparency, Innovation, Trust." Hundreds of reporters crowded in, microphones and camera lenses trained on the stage, waiting for the official explanation. When he stepped out, Adrian wore a charcoal suit and a navy tie-the-safe PR color. He smiled with calculated warmth, launching into his speech as if it were a keynote at a startup conference, accepting responsibility for misunderstandings, insisting Neural Edge had always operated transparently, and pledging to protect user interests. He even slipped in a few sentimental lines about family and wanting to reconcile with his wife. Some reporters nodded, others frowned. But before any of them could decide on a headline, Jordan Hale delivered the killing blow. The moment Adrian finished speaking, reporters' phones lit up in unison. The shared press inbox for Silicon Valley media had just received a massive file from Jordan's office, containing the full set of evidence gathered from Isabella and Ava, screenshots, internal emails, data sale contracts, and never-before-seen deepfake AI videos. Jordan hadn't sent it only to the press. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and the Department of Justice received it at the same time. In mere minutes, the misunderstanding narrative Adrian had been building collapsed in front of hundreds of flashing cameras. Social media erupted like fireworks. The hashtag number Neural Edge scandal shot to the top of Twitter. A famous tech streamer even went live reading Adrian's emails aloud, sipping coffee as if telling a stand-up comedy routine. The market responded with ruthless efficiency. In a single day, Neural Edge stock lost 40% of its value. Major investors who once hailed Adrian as a modern-day Steve Jobs scrambled to pull their funds. One venture capital firm even tweeted bluntly, "We invest in the future, not in scandals." In the small Mission District apartment, Isabella watched the news on television. She didn't smile, but her eyes carried a quiet mix of relief and resolve. Mia sat beside her, eating popcorn and commenting like she was watching a championship game. And the winning goal goes to our team. At the far end of the table, Ava said nothing. But for the first time in weeks, her hands rested loosely in her lap. That evening, Adrian called. His voice was different, no longer authoritative, but urgent, wrapped in a thin layer of negotiation. He offered an amicable divorce settlement, complete with a massive payout and a lifetime non-disclosure clause. Isabella listened to every word, then answered simply, "It's not about the money, it's about the truth." Silence on the other end, a pause from a man realizing he had just lost the control he had always taken for granted. Isabella hung up, feeling as though she had just closed the final door. On television, a financial commentator declared that Neural Edge was teetering on the brink of collapse, but Isabella knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. The deeper layers, the shadow AI's client network, the covert overseas transactions had yet to be fully exposed. Jordan was already preparing the next wave of documents. Ava continued extracting data, and Isabella was learning to become the one steering the narrative, instead of a side character in someone else's story. The media storm wasn't over, but for the first time, Isabella felt she wasn't just standing passively in the eye of it, she was directing the wind. 9 months after that fateful press conference, the name Adrian Cross no longer appeared on any list of Silicon Valley's power players. Instead, it flashed across evening news broadcasts under the headline, "Neural Edge CEO convicted." A federal court sentenced him to years in prison for fraud, violations of data protection laws, and international money laundering. Neural Edge was stripped from his control, restructured under the oversight of an independent board. The media dubbed the case the Watergate of the AI era. Photographs of Adrian leaving the courthouse creased suit, eyes avoiding the cameras, were shared millions of times across social media. The man who once walked red carpets now walked through a prison gate, a path that had never been part of any strategic plan he'd written. As for Isabella, she had left San Francisco behind. That winter, in a warm, modest apartment in Seattle, surrounded by family and friends, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Phoenix, a reminder that from ashes, one can still rise again. In those first nights, when Phoenix cried for milk, Isabella often thought about everything that had happened. Sometimes, she caught herself laughing quietly, not out of relief, but from the realization that she had survived a war that once seemed impossible to even imagine fighting. She turned down countless interview requests from media outlets eager to exploit her personal story. Instead, Isabella accepted an offer to serve as an advisor for a nonprofit dedicated to protecting data privacy and helping women in tech escape toxic work environments. If I've been there, she thought, then I can help someone else find their way out. A year later, she launched Silent Code, a secure platform for engineers and developers to report corporate misconduct without fear of retaliation. Within 12 months, Silent Code had empowered dozens of tech employees to come forward with secrets they had once believed would remain buried forever. The International Cybersecurity Conference in Geneva marked another milestone. Isabella took the stage in a crisp white blazer, hair pulled back, eyes steady. The hall was packed from veteran security experts to wide-eyed technology students. She spoke about her journey, but didn't recount the slap or the betrayal. Instead, she spoke about silence, the currency of powerful corporations, the tool they use to maintain control, and about how an ordinary person can break it. Her voice was low but unwavering. Sometimes, strength doesn't lie in what you shout aloud, but in how patiently you collect every line of data until the truth can no longer be hidden. When she stepped back from the podium, the entire hall rose to its feet. Applause thundered like a wave surging from the front rows to the ceiling. In one of those front seats, Phoenix sat cradled in his grandfather's arms, his wide brown eyes fixed on his mother. The stage lights reflected in them like a small flame just lit. Isabella smiled. She knew Phoenix would grow up in a different world, a world where secrets could no longer remain hidden simply because those who held them were too powerful. And then, as she stepped off the stage, she remembered that night at Yerba Buena, the camera flashes, the slap, the murmur of the crowd. Back then, everyone thought her story would end there. But she had rewritten the entire script, not as a tragedy of downfall, but as an anthem about transforming pain into the power to change the world. "Get out!" The scream echoes as Sophia, 8 months pregnant, is shoved from a gleaming Bentley onto Miami's rain-soaked streets. Her $2,000 dress clings to her trembling body, her world shattered by her millionaire husband, Ethan, who calls her a disgrace. Alone, heartbroken, she clutches her belly, fearing for her unborn child. But the silent driver, watching through the rearview mirror, hides a secret that could destroy Ethan. Who is this mysterious man, and how will he change Sophia's fate? Stick around, this story of betrayal and redemption will leave you speechless. The rain lashed against the Bentley Continental's tinted windows, a relentless Miami downpour that turned Ocean Drive into a shimmering blur of neon and despair. Inside, the silence between Sofia Alvarez and her tech mogul husband, Ethan Caldwell, was colder than the storm outside. The car's interior, a cathedral of hand-stitched leather and polished walnut, felt like a gilded cage, trapping Sophia in its opulent embrace. Her 8-month pregnant frame shifted uncomfortably, the $2,000 silk dress clinging to her skin, a cruel reminder of the life she'd traded her freedom for. They had just left a glittering charity gala at the Fontainebleau, where Miami's elites sipped champagne under chandeliers. But the night had soured when a drunken investor, a sleazy real estate tycoon with a leer that made Sophia's skin crawl, cornered her with crude remarks about her unborn child. Before she could react, Henry Langston, a silver-haired titan of industry, had stepped in, his calm authority sending the creeps scurrying. Ethan, however, saw only humiliation. His Brioni suit, tailored to perfection, seemed to tighten with his rage. He gripped his phone, knuckles white, his jaw clenched so hard it might have cracked a diamond. Sophia, her hand protectively cradling her belly, felt her baby kick a tiny rebellion against the tension suffocating the car. She'd seen this Ethan before, the one who morphed from charming tech prodigy to a man obsessed with control. At the gala, he'd been all smiles, toasting investors with promises of his next big app. But now, alone with her, his mask was off. The air was thick with his unspoken accusation. She'd made him look weak. Her attempt to defend herself, whispering that Henry Langston was only being kind, fell flat, like a pebble tossed into the Atlantic. Ethan's eyes, sharp as the Miami skyline, didn't even flicker her way. He was a king dethroned in his own mind, and Sophia was the scapegoat. The Bentley purred through the storm, its headlights slicing through the rain like a predator's gaze. Sophia's mind replayed the gala, the clinking glasses, the whispers of power deals, the way Ethan's charm had once swept her off her feet. She'd been a budding curator at a small Coconut Grove gallery, her days filled with dusty canvases and dreams of showcasing new artists. Ethan, a Forbes 30 under 30 darling, had promised her the world, a penthouse, designer dresses, a life of influence, but that world came with chains. Her simple upbringing, her love for quiet coffee shops and indie art, was a stain on his perfect image. Her pregnancy, meant to be a shared joy, had become another variable for him to manage, from her diet to her wardrobe, all curated to project power. The car slowed, veering onto a dimly lit side street far from their South Beach penthouse. Sophia's heart sank. This wasn't home. The rain pounded harder, as if the sky itself was furious. Ethan's silence broke, not with words, but with a single, deliberate motion. He leaned across her, his cologne sharp and suffocating, and pressed the door release. The lock clicked, and a gust of wet, salty air rushed in. Sophia froze, her breath catching as she realized what was coming. Ethan's face, carved from marble and malice, turned to her at last. His expression held no warmth, only a cold, calculated disgust. He didn't need to speak. His actions screamed louder than the storm. With a gentle but firm push, he forced her out, her heels slipping on the wet pavement. The door slammed shut, a gunshot in the night, leaving her alone, drenched and trembling. Sophia stood there, one hand clutching her belly, the other shielding her face from the rain's assault. Her dress, once a symbol of Ethan's wealth, was now a sodden weight, dragging her toward despair. The Bentley's taillights glowed red, mocking her as they faded into the storm. She felt small, insignificant, like a discarded prop in Ethan's meticulously staged life. The city's pulse-honking horns, distant salsa music seemed to mock her too, a reminder of the vibrant Miami she'd once loved but now felt so far away. Her baby kicked again, a spark of defiance in the darkness. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. But as the rain soaked her to the bone, a flicker of movement caught her eye. The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out, unfazed by the deluge. Who was this man, and why did his calm presence feel like the first hint of salvation? Sophia's tears mixed with the rain, her heart a tangled knot of fear and shame. She'd been Ethan's trophy, his perfect wife, but tonight, she was nothing more than a burden he'd cast aside. The driver, Mr. Thompson, had always been a quiet, constant, polite, almost invisible, his kind eyes catching hers in the rearview mirror. Now, as he stood in the storm, his silhouette framed by the Bentley's headlights, there was something different about him. A strength, a purpose that made her pulse quicken. Was he just a witness to her humiliation, or something more? The answer lay just beyond the rain, and missing it would be a regret she couldn't bear. The Miami rain hammered the pavement, a merciless curtain that drenched Sofia Alvarez as she stumbled on the slick Ocean Drive sidewalk, her silk dress a soggy, $2,000 ruin, clinging to her trembling, 8-month pregnant frame. Her world had collapsed in the echo of her husband Ethan's cruel dismissal, the Bentley's taillights vanishing like a broken promise. Alone she stood, one hand shielding her belly where her baby kicked with stubborn defiance, the other wiping rain, or was it tears, from her eyes. The city's neon pulse mocked her despair, its salsa rhythms a cruel reminder of the vibrant life she'd once known. Then, a sound pierced the storm, the soft click of the Bentley's driver's side door. Mr. Thompson, the ever-quiet chauffeur, emerged, his tall frame undeterred by the downpour, his gray uniform darkening with each raindrop. Without a word, he shrugged off his wool coat, draping it over Sophia's shoulders like a shield against the cold. The warmth of the fabric was a fleeting comfort, a whisper of hope in the chaos. Sophia's breath hitched as Mr. Thompson gestured toward the Bentley, not to the back seat where she'd spent countless rides as Ethan's curated trophy, but to the front passenger seat, a gesture so unexpected it felt like a rebellion against her husband's world. She hesitated, her soaked heels wobbling, but his steady hand guided her, a silent promise of safety. Inside, the car's heated leather enveloped her, a stark contrast to the icy rejection outside. Mr. Thompson slid into the driver's seat, his movements calm, almost ceremonial, as he cranked the heat to full blast. The air warmed her shivering bones, and for a moment, the storm seemed to retreat. Then he turned to her, his kind eyes, those same eyes she'd glimpsed in the rearview mirror countless times, now burning with a quiet fury, not at her but at the injustice she'd endured. His face, weathered yet resolute, held a depth she'd never noticed in his months as their driver. In that charged silence he spoke, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of a long-held secret. He was no mere chauffeur. He was Henry Langston, the billionaire who'd silenced the room at the Fontainebleau Gala, the man Ethan had courted for months to fund his tech empire. More astonishingly, he was her godfather, bound by a vow to her late father, Miguel Alvarez, to watch over her. Sophia's mind reeled, her thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and dawning clarity. Henry Langston, the titan of logistics who could make markets tremble with a phone call, had been hiding in plain sight, chauffeuring her through Miami's glittering chaos. His presence at the gala hadn't been a coincidence. He'd been there, as always, to protect her. Sophia's gaze darted to the rain-streaked windshield, where Miami's skyline blurred into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. She'd always seen Mr. Thompson as a fixture, like the Bentley's chrome trim, polished, reliable, invisible. Yet now, his quiet kindnesses flashed through her memory. The bottle of water left in the back seat on sweltering days, the way he'd lingered a moment longer when she seemed unsteady, the gentle nod when she'd thanked him for small courtesies. He'd been her unseen guardian, a sentinel disguised in a driver's cap, watching over her as Ethan's control tightened. The humor of it struck her a billionaire playing chauffeur, probably chuckling to himself as Ethan strutted like a peacock, oblivious to the real power in the driver's seat. Henry's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles betraying a restrained anger. He didn't need to say more. His presence was a vow, a promise that Ethan's cruelty would not go unanswered. The Bentley purred to life, gliding away from the desolate street, not toward Sophia's sterile South Beach penthouse, but toward a sanctuary she couldn't yet imagine. Her heart pounded, not with fear now, but with a spark of something new, hope perhaps, or the faint outline of vengeance. As the city lights streaked past, she sensed a shift, a storm of her own brewing. Henry's secret was the key to unlocking her cage, but what lay beyond the rain-soaked horizon? Missing this would be a regret too heavy to bear. The Bentley glided through Miami's rain-slicked streets, its headlights carving a path through the neon glow of Coconut Grove toward a coral stone mansion nestled in the heart of Coral Gables. Sophia Alvarez, still wrapped in Mr. Thompson No, Henry Langston's wool coat, sat in the front seat, her soaked dress, a heavy reminder of Ethan's betrayal. The warmth of the car's heater battled the chill in her bones, but it was the weight of Henry's revelation that set her heart racing. He wasn't just a driver. He was her godfather, a billionaire guardian hiding behind a chauffeur's cap. As the city's vibrant pulse faded into the quiet elegance of Coral Gables, Sophia sensed the storm of her life shifting towards something monumental, a truth that could rewrite her story. The mansion's wrought iron gates parted silently, ushering them into a world of old money charm. Inside, a cozy library awaited, its mahogany shelves brimming with leather-bound books, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden flickers across the room, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile penthouse Sophia shared with Ethan. She sank into a plush armchair, her pregnant belly a gentle weight, her baby's faint kicks a reminder of the life she fought for. Henry stood by the fireplace, his silver hair catching the light, his face etched with a mix of sorrow and resolve. His presence, once unassuming behind the wheel, now radiated a quiet power that filled the room like the hum of a distant storm. In this sanctuary, Henry unraveled a secret that shook Sophia to her core. Her father, Miguel Alvarez, hadn't just been the gentle art historian she remembered, a man who spun tales of Renaissance painters over bedtime stories. He was Henry's closest friend, his brother in all but blood, and the co-founder of Langston Global, a logistics empire that moved art, cargo, and wealth across continents. Their partnership began in a cramped Miami garage, fueled by Miguel's passion for beauty and Henry's knack for turning dreams into dollars. When Miguel died in a tragic car crash when Sophia was 12, Henry made a vow at his bedside to protect his daughter and wife. The humor of it tickled Sophia's frayed nerves, a billionaire godfather playing chauffeur, probably smirking as he polished the Bentley while Ethan preened, oblivious to the titan in his employ. Henry's voice softened as he revealed the heart of the secret. Miguel's stake in Langston Global, carefully nurtured over decades, had grown into a trust fund worth $5.2 billion. Sophia, unaware of her own wealth, was one of America's richest women, her fortune dwarfing Ethan's leveraged tech empire. The numbers danced in her mind, too many zeros, too surreal to grasp. All her life, she'd lived modestly, her mother insisting on a grounded upbringing, shielding her from the corrupting lure of wealth. Ethan had preyed on that modesty, casting her as a humble curator he'd rescued with his wealth, when in truth, her inheritance could buy his company 10 times over. The irony was delicious, like a plot twist in a Miami telenovela, and Sophia's lips twitched at the thought of Ethan's smug face crumbling if he knew. Her mind spun, piecing together fragments of her past, her mother's pride, refusing lavish gifts, the scholarships that mysteriously appeared for her art history degree, the quiet donations to her gallery. Henry had been there, a shadow orchestrating her safety, never interfering until Ethan's cruelty forced his hand. His eyes, kind yet fierce, met hers, and she saw not just a protector, but a man carrying the weight of a promise kept through decades. The storm outside raged on, But within these walls, Sophia felt a spark ignite a realization that she wasn't Ethan's victim, but the heir to a legacy of strength and vision. Her father's dreams, his love for art, lived in her, and this fortune was her birthright, not Ethan's to control. As the fire's warmth seeped into her, Sophia's fear began to melt, replaced by a burgeoning resolve. She wasn't just a discarded wife. She was Miguel's daughter, a woman with the power to reshape her future. Henry's revelation wasn't just about money, it was a call to reclaim her identity. But what would she do with this newfound power, and how would it change the game against Ethan? Walking away now would mean missing a transformation too epic to ignore. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. In the heart of Henry Langston's Coral Gables mansion, Sofia Alvarez stood at the edge of a transformation, the firelight from the library's hearth casting her shadow as a warrior ready to rise. The revelation of her $5.2 billion inheritance still buzzed in her veins, a pulse of power that drowned out the echo of Ethan's cruelty. Gone was the trembling woman abandoned in Miami's rain. In her place was a spark of fury, fueled by the legacy of her father, Miguel Alvarez. The opulent room, with its velvet drapes and shelves of art tomes, felt like a war room now, where Sophia's fear was forging into resolve. Her baby's gentle kicks, a rhythm of defiance, urged her forward, whispering that she was no longer Ethan's pawn but a queen reclaiming her board. The mansion's quiet elegance stood in stark contrast to the sterile South Beach penthouse where Ethan had caged her dreams. Sophia's mind flickered to the nights she'd spent there, her love for art relegated to choosing wall decor to match his ego. Now, in this sanctuary, she saw a path to freedom. Henry, her billionaire godfather, leaned against the fireplace, his silver hair glinting like a crown of wisdom. His calm presence was a lighthouse in her storm, guiding her toward action. With his support, Sophia reached out to Olivia Harper, Miami's sharpest divorce attorney, whose reputation for dismantling powerful men was whispered about in boardrooms and beach clubs alike. Olivia's office, a sleek glass fortress in Brickell, became Sophia's first battlefield. The attorney's piercing gaze and tailored suit exuded a confidence that felt contagious, a promise that Ethan's empire could crumble. Sophia's heart burned with a single unshakable desire, not for Ethan's wealth, but for liberation from his shadow. She envisioned a future where her unborn son, nestled safely within her, would know a mother who stood tall, not one, bowed by control. The idea of Ethan's smug face, so certain of his dominance, twisting in defeat, brought a fleeting, almost guilty smile to her lips. Imagine him, the tech golden boy, outmaneuvered by the wife he'd discarded like last season's gadget. Her resolve hardened. She wanted him erased from her life, stripped of any claim to her child. Olivia, with a nod as sharp as a guillotine, understood. She promised a legal strategy that would cut through Ethan's arrogance like a Miami hurricane through a palm tree. Beyond the fight for freedom, Sophia's dreams began to take shape, rooted in the passion her father had instilled in her. She envisioned a gallery in Wynwood, Miami's pulsing art district, where vibrant murals danced on warehouse walls. The Alvarez Gallery would be her tribute to Miguel, a space to nurture young artists, their bold canvases a rebellion against the sterile world Ethan had forced upon her. She could already see it, sunlight streaming through loft windows, illuminating works that spoke of struggle and triumph, just as her own story was unfolding. The thought was a spark, igniting a creative fire she'd long suppressed. Henry watched her, his eyes crinkling with pride, as if seeing Miguel's spirit reborn in her ambition. His silent encouragement was a reminder that she carried a legacy no one could steal. Not Ethan, not the storm. The humor of her situation wasn't lost on her. A week ago, she'd been Ethan's trophy, her every move choreographed to his script. Now, armed with a billionaire godfather and a fortune that could buy half of South Beach, she was scripting her own comeback. It was like a plot twist in a blockbuster, the kind that makes audiences cheer. Sophia's hands rested on her belly, feeling her son's movements, a tiny co-conspirator in her revolution. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was building a world where her child would know strength, not submission. The mansion's warmth wrapped around her, a cocoon for her metamorphosis, but the real battle loomed ahead. Ethan's downfall was coming, and Sophia was ready to orchestrate it. But how far would her newfound power take her, and what price would Ethan pay? Walking away now would mean missing a reckoning too thrilling to ignore. The Miami skyline glittered like a crown of stars, but for Ethan Caldwell, it was the backdrop to his unraveling empire. In the days following Sofia Alvarez's transformation, Henry Langston unleashed a meticulously crafted storm of retribution from his Coral Gables stronghold. Sophia, once a trembling figure in the rain, now stood as a silent architect of justice, her resolve as unyielding as the $5.2 billion legacy pulsing through her veins. The Bentley's betrayal, where Ethan had cast her out like a discarded trophy, had ignited a fire that Henry, her billionaire godfather, was fanning into a blaze. His team, a cadre of financial sharks and legal hawks, moved with the precision of a Miami thunderstorm, striking at the heart of Ethan's tech empire with devastating force. Henry's plan was a masterclass in calculated chaos. His operatives, cloaked in the anonymity of boardroom warfare, shorted Ethan's company stock, triggering a cascade that saw shares plummet from a 20% dip to a catastrophic 60% freefall. Wall Street traders, once fawning over Ethan's keynote speeches, now fled like tourists before a hurricane. The financial press, ever hungry for scandal, branded him the tech charlatan, their headlines splashing across Miami's digital billboards like venom. Ethan's empire, built on leveraged loans and inflated promises, cracked under the pressure, its glass and steel offices in Brickell suddenly feeling like a house of cards. Sophia, from the quiet sanctuary of Henry's mansion, watched the news unfold, her heart a mix of vindication and quiet awe at the power she now wielded. The true dagger, however, was a grainy security video from the Bentley's dashboard camera, capturing every second of Ethan's cruelty that rain-soaked night. Sophia's silhouette, pregnant and pleading, stumbled into the storm as Ethan's cold shove sealed his fate. Olivia Harper, the razor-sharp attorney Sophia had enlisted, wielded this footage like a guillotine. In a sterile conference room overlooking Biscayne Bay, she presented Ethan with an ultimatum: sign the divorce papers, relinquish all rights to their unborn child, or watch the video go viral, shredding his reputation beyond repair. Ethan, once the untouchable tech prodigy, sat pale and trembling, his tailored suit now a mockery of his former swagger. The man who dismissed Sophia as a liability now faced the wreckage of his own arrogance, his empire crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. Sophia felt no joy in Ethan's downfall, only a steely satisfaction. Her baby's kicks, a steady rhythm against her palm, reminded her of the future she was protecting, a life free from Ethan's control. The penthouse in South Beach, once a glittering stage for Ethan's ego, now stood dim and hollow, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting a man stripped of power. Ethan's signature on the divorce papers was a final, shaky surrender, each stroke of the pen erasing his claim to Sophia and their son. The humor of it struck her faintly. Ethan, who'd once bragged about owning Miami's tech scene, now reduced to a footnote in his own story, outplayed by a woman he'd underestimated and a driver he'd ignored. It was almost comical, like a plot twist in a South Beach soap opera, where the villain's smirk fades to a grimace. Henry's role remained unseen, a puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows. His billionaire status, once a secret hidden behind a chauffeur's cap, had become Sophia's greatest weapon. The financial assault wasn't just about money, it was a message that no one could break a promise to Miguel Alvarez's daughter and walk away unscathed. Sophia, though not present in that conference room, felt the weight of justice settle over her like a warm Miami breeze. She was no longer the discarded wife but a force, her father's legacy and Henry's loyalty forging her into something unstoppable. The city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm salsa beats, ocean waves, but for Sophia, it was the sound of a new chapter opening, one where she held the pen. As Ethan faded into his darkened penthouse, Sophia stood on the cusp of her rebirth, her dreams of the Alvarez Gallery taking shape in Winwood's vibrant heart. The victory was sweet, but the real triumph lay ahead, in a life built on her terms. What would Sophia create with her newfound freedom, and how would her story inspire the world? Walking away now would mean missing a finale too electrifying to ignore. Under Miami's blazing sun, Sophia Alvarez stood at the threshold of her new life, the vibrant pulse of Winwood's art district humming around her like a heartbeat. The Alvarez Gallery, a sleek haven of glass and steel, rose amidst the neighborhood's kaleidoscope of murals, its opening night a beacon of her rebirth. Gone was the woman abandoned in the rain, her $2,000 dress a sodden memory of Ethan's betrayal. In her place stood a creator, her eyes alight with purpose, her 8-month pregnant silhouette commanding the room as she welcomed artists and dreamers to a space born from her father's legacy. The gallery's walls, adorned with bold canvases, whispered of resilience, each stroke a defiance of the storm she'd weathered. The night was electric, Miami's art scene buzzing with influencers, collectors, and locals drawn to the gallery's promise. Fairy lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over sculptures and paintings that told stories of struggle and triumph, much like Sophia's own. Her navy dress, simple yet elegant, hugged her belly, where her son's gentle kicks felt like applause for her courage. She moved through the crowd, her smile a quiet rebellion against the years spent as Ethan's curated trophy. Memories of her father, Miguel Alvarez, flooded back his late-night talks of art's power to heal, his sketches tucked into her childhood books. The gallery was her tribute to him, a space where young artists, like she once was, could paint their futures without fear. In the weeks since Ethan's downfall, Sophia had shed the weight of his control like a snake shedding skin. His empire, once a glittering facade, had crumbled under Henry Langston's financial assault, leaving him a pariah in his South Beach penthouse. The divorce papers, signed in his trembling hand, had severed his claim to her life and her son's. Sophia felt no malice, only a serene satisfaction that justice had prevailed. Henry, her billionaire godfather, remained her silent anchor, his Coral Gables mansion a haven where she planned her future. There, she'd named her son, Lucas Alvarez Langston, a name that wove together her father's passion and Henry's unwavering loyalty. The choice was a quiet nod to the men who'd shaped her, a promise to raise her child in love and freedom. The gallery's opening was more than a launch, it was a declaration. Sophia's vision had transformed a derelict warehouse into a cultural heartbeat, its exposed beams and polished floors a canvas for Miami's creative soul. She'd poured her heart into every detail, from the local artists she championed to the community workshops she planned. The irony wasn't lost on her. Ethan, who'd mocked her love for art as a hobby, would have choked on his overpriced espresso seeing her now, the mistress of a cultural empire he could never touch. It was a delicious twist, like a Miami sunset turning the sky to fire, and she allowed herself a private chuckle at the thought. Sophia's new life unfolded in the mansion's warm embrace, where she and Lucas would build a world of color and possibility. The nursery, painted with soft blues and murals of ocean waves, awaited her son's arrival, a symbol of the freedom she'd fought for. Henry often visited, his eyes crinkling with pride as he watched her grow into her power. The $5.2 billion trust fund was a tool, but Sophia's true strength lay in her courage, forged in the rain and tempered by her father's legacy. Miami's ocean stretched before the mansion, its lapping waves a reminder that storms don't break the strong, they sculpt them. Sophia stood taller, her heart full, knowing she'd found her true self not in wealth but in purpose. As the gallery's crowd toasted her vision, Sophia felt her father's spirit in the laughter, the clinking glasses, the shared dreams. She was no longer defined by Ethan's cruelty, but by her ability to rise, to create, to love. Her story was a testament to resilience, a beacon for anyone who'd ever been underestimated. What would her next chapter hold, and how would it inspire those who heard it? Walking away now would mean missing a story of triumph too radiant to ignore. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. In the romantic atmosphere of your sister's wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York, you, Elena Thompson, force a strained smile as you catch the bridal bouquet, clinging to the hope it might bring luck to your fractured marriage. But then, amidst the applause, your husband Victor, the powerful CEO of a tech company in Silicon Alley, erupts in anger and slaps you hard across the face, right in front of hundreds of guests. You're pregnant, aching in both body and soul. But Father Lucas, the priest your brother, once a lawyer, pulls him away, whispering, he's hiding something horrific. From that slap, Elena uncovers an affair with a young assistant and a massive money laundering scheme. Don't miss her journey from hell to freedom. You might see yourself in her story. At St. Patrick's Cathedral, where granite columns gleam under the summer sun, Elena's younger sister, Sophia, glides down the aisle like a modern goddess. Her vintage lace wedding dress clings perfectly to her frame, accentuating the gentle curve of her 5-month pregnant belly, a radiant symbol of pure joy and new hope. Sophia's new husband, a kind-hearted software engineer from Queens, gazes at her as if she's the world's greatest invention, not a tech app, but true love itself. Their vows echo through the cathedral, carrying the scent of white roses and blessings from Father Lucas, the officiating priest, who happens to be Elena's brother, a renowned Manhattan lawyer, before embracing a path of faith, now standing there with a warm smile but eyes betraying a subtle worry. Elena Thompson, 42, stands as a bridesmaid, adjusting her silk dress for the third time in 10 fleeting minutes. The smooth silk suddenly feels too tight, as if struggling to contain the anxieties swelling inside her. At this age, 5 months pregnant, a late, unexpected gift after 2 decades of marriage. This should be a time of joy, but today, it only weighs her down. Watching Sophia glow, Elena feels a quiet pang of envy. Her 2 8-year-old sister radiates an authentic happiness that seems to touch everyone around, from Armani-clad guests to aunts from Brooklyn. And Elena? She's accustomed to society weddings, where everything is a facade. Upper East Side galas, where business networking hides behind expensive wine and fake smiles. This wedding feels different, so genuine it tightens her chest, as if whispering what real happiness looks like, and it bears no resemblance to her own life. Beside Elena stands Victor Hayes, her husband of 20 years, the 5-year-old CEO of Hayes Tech, a billion-dollar tech empire in Manhattan's Silicon Alley. At 6'2", his tailored Italian suit hugs his broad shoulders and trim waist, commanding attention wherever he goes. His cologne, pricier than most people's monthly rent in Queens, wafts with the scent of success and power. But his arm around Elena's waist today feels possessive rather than affectionate, as if he's marking territory instead of sharing joy. Elena is used to this. Their marriage has become a polished business arrangement, filled with charity galas at the Plaza, vacations in the Hamptons, and private jet trips to San Francisco for board meetings. Victor scans the crowd, his calculating eyes those of a businessman hunting opportunities. Even at his sister-in-law's wedding, he's likely plotting how to pitch an investor among the wealthy guests. With a bitter hint of humor, Elena wonders if he'll seal a deal at the dessert table, or at least swap business cards between bites of wedding cake. She nods at polite remarks from relatives who admire her perfect life, the Upper East Side penthouse, the charity galas she hosts, and now the news of a baby on the way. But behind her practiced smile, Elena feels the growing distance. Victor whispers in her ear, "You look stunning today, but don't let that baby bump slow you down." The words sound like a compliment but carry a subtle jab, a little joke he often uses to keep her in her place as the perfect wife. Always beautiful but never an embarrassment. Elena laughs it off, but inside, she wonders when his words became so sharp. As Sophia turns and tosses the bouquet, the single women jostle and laugh, and though Elena doesn't try, the bouquet of white roses lands in her hands, its silk ribbon wrapping around her fingers like fate. Victor murmurs. Maybe it's a sign for a renewal in our marriage. His smile doesn't reach his eyes, and a chill runs down Elena's spine as if he's hinting at something only he understands. In that moment, amid applause and laughter, Elena can't help but smile at the ironic thought that this bouquet might be a curse rather than a blessing like in those American rom-coms she's watched, where catching the bouquet flips the heroine's life upside down. But in reality, she has no idea that in just a few hours, a slap will change everything, tearing apart the facade she's fought to maintain for 2 decades. The scene shifts from the sacred grandeur of St. Patrick's Cathedral to the lavish opulence of the Plaza Hotel, where Sophia's wedding reception unfolds like a quintessential American dream, extravagant, glittering, and simmering with secrets beneath the surface. Crystal chandeliers cast a glow over tables draped in cream linen, adorned with pristine white roses, offering a mesmerizing view of Central Park, where couples stroll beneath lush green trees. This is the kind of event every New Yorker dreams of. French champagne flowing like a river, delicate lobster appetizers, and laughter echoing from wealthy Upper East Side guests. Elena, still reeling from catching the bouquet, tries to mingle with relatives and friends, answering familiar questions about her affluent life, the luxurious Upper East Side penthouse, weekend getaways in the Hamptons, and now the joyful news of her unborn child. But amidst the lively crowd, a strange loneliness creeps in, as if her 5-month pregnant belly is reminding her of the voids in her heart, voids that Victor seems incapable of filling. Victor, the quintessential Manhattan CEO, tall, confident, exuding the scent of success, moves through the room like a shark in a social ocean. He engages guests not about the wedding's joy, but about potential business opportunities, scanning the crowd to spot investors or partners for Hayes Tech. Elena watches him from afar, feeling the growing distance. He laughs heartily, claps shoulders warmly, but when he returns to her side, his smile vanishes, replaced by a calculating gaze. She tries to fill the silence with light comments about the floral arrangements or Sophia's impeccable taste, but Victor only nods absently, his mind clearly elsewhere, perhaps on boardroom meetings in Silicon Alley. Or worse, on the late-night dinners he's been having with Madison, his 5-year-old assistant with an ambitious smile and legs that seem to go on forever. The tension escalates when Elena, unable to hold back, quietly asks about those late work sessions. She only wants a simple reassurance, a tender gesture between husband and wife, but Victor snaps, his face flushing red under the chandelier light. "Are you questioning me?" He hisses, his voice low enough to avoid eavesdroppers, but sharp enough to pierce Elena's heart. And then, before everyone, the laughing guests, the toasting relatives, Victor raises his hand and slaps her hard across the face, the sound reverberating like a bomb in the festive air. Elena's cheek burns, tears welling up, but she holds herself together, too stunned to speak. The crowd falls silent, smiles frozen, and someone whispers, "Oh my God," while another guest awkwardly jokes, maybe he mistook her for a tough investor. A clumsy attempt at humor to diffuse the heavy atmosphere, but no one laughs. Victor growls, "You're embarrassing me," before turning away, leaving Elena standing there, hand on her cheek, humiliation spreading like wildfire. Father Lucas, Elena's brother, the priest with a past as a top-tier lawyer before choosing a religious path, rushes to her side, his face stern beneath his ceremonial robes. He pulls Victor into the hallway, his voice a commanding whisper, like a lawyer cross-examining a witness. After the reception, as the crowd thins and the plaza grows quieter, Lucas takes Elena to a private corner and reveals a horrifying truth he's kept hidden. A private investigator named Rebecca contacted him weeks ago, suspecting Victor of large-scale financial fraud, money laundering through Hayes Tech, tax evasion worth millions, and secret transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Worse, Rebecca has evidence of an affair with Madison, that young assistant, with clandestine meetings at hotels and upscale restaurants in Midtown. Elena is floored, her heart pounding like a war drum, the pieces falling into place. The late-night calls Victor took behind closed study doors, his sudden interest in Swiss banks, and the way he started buying new clothes and hitting the gym obsessively, all now glaring warning signs she'd willfully ignored. Pregnant at this age, what should have been a joy now makes her feel more vulnerable than ever, as if her unborn child is witnessing the collapse of their family. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. The morning after, as the first rays of sunlight filter through the lush green canopy of Central Park, Elena seeks refuge at her favorite cafe on Central Park. West, a cozy nook filled with the rich aroma of espresso and the murmurs of busy New Yorkers, a place where she often escapes the frenetic pace of the Upper East Side. After a sleepless night, her cheeks still stinging from Victor's slap and her mind reeling from her brother Lucas's horrifying revelations, Elena craves a familiar haven to sort her thoughts, as if a latte with oat milk could quell the storm raging in her heart. This cafe, with its worn wooden chairs and exposed brick walls adorned with local artists' paintings, always feels authentic, a wry contrast to the polished extravagance Victor has built, where everything gleams to perfection, like the flawless tech apps of Hayes Tech he endlessly boasts about. Elena chooses her usual corner table by the window, where she can watch dog walkers in the park, young couples embracing under the trees, and tries to lose herself in the novel Sophia gave her, a story of women rediscovering themselves in midlife, now feeling like prophecy. But fate, with its dark sense of humor, has other plans. Just a few feet away, behind a high-backed chair, sit Victor and Madison, huddled close, as if this cafe is their secret office. Elena freezes, her heart pounding, but she doesn't turn. Instead, she pretends to focus on her phone, ears straining to catch every whispered word. Victor, with the confident tone of a Manhattan CEO, lays out his plans as if pitching to a boardroom rather than confiding in his mistress. He admits, with a casual arrogance laced with excitement, that he's funneled millions of dollars into accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, vast sums from Hayes Tech's investment funds, masked as legitimate transactions. "We'll disappear right after this wedding," he says, voice low, but clear enough for Elena to hear, leaving Elena with nothing. She deserves it for being so naive. Only good for shopping and useless charity. Madison giggles, and Elena feels a stab of pain. Victor paints her as an irresponsible wife, a nuisance in his empire, living off his generosity without questioning where the money comes from. He smirks as he mocks how she's too busy with plaza galas to notice reality, as if Elena's life is a comedy he's directed, where she plays the clueless sidekick to his shining star. Elena trembles, gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles turn white, but she doesn't confront them. Fear mingled with fury keeps her rooted, listening on. Victor continues, revealing plans to flee with Madison post-wedding, leaving Elena with an unborn child and assets seized, calling it a lesson in dependency. He laughs, comparing her to the foolish investors who lost money in Hayes Tech's ventures. A dark humor Elena once found charming, now venomous mockery. Madison asks, "What about your wife?" And Victor replies with a dismissive tone, like discussing an employee about to be fired. "She'll figure out how to survive. But that's no longer my problem." Elena feels a bitter taste spread from her mouth to her heart, realizing Victor isn't just cheating but a sociopathic criminal, treating others as tools for his ambition. A monster cloaked in the polished veneer of a CEO revered by Manhattan. She leaves the cafe undetected, legs shaking as if after an earthquake, and immediately calls Lucas. With his background as a Wall Street lawyer who handled major financial cases before becoming a priest, Lucas listens and urges her to work with private investigator Rebecca and the FBI. "This isn't just an affair, sister. This is federal crime, and we need to act before he vanishes." Elena, still reeling but feeling a spark of fierce determination ignite beneath her pain, realizes Victor isn't the husband she imagined, but a manipulator who sees her as disposable property. Her pregnancy makes her more vulnerable, but it also fuels her strength. This child deserves a mother who's a fighter, not a victim. Sitting in the park, A cool breeze from Central Park easing her dizziness, Elena wonders with bitter humor if yesterday's bouquet was a warning rather than a stroke of luck. From the tranquil corner of a cafe on Central Park West, where Victor's whispered betrayals still echo in her ears, Elena dives into a daring plan straight out of an American spy thriller, but this is real life, backed by the FBI and fueled by her own heart. After an urgent call to her brother Lucas, the priest with the razor-sharp analytical mind of a former Wall Street lawyer, Elena meets private investigator Rebecca in a discreet Midtown Manhattan office. Rebecca, with a professional demeanor and steely eyes that have unraveled countless corporate secrets, lays it out plainly. Victor isn't just an adulterer, he's the linchpin of a massive financial fraud network, and Elena is the key to bringing him down. With her 5-month pregnant belly reminding her of the responsibility ahead, Elena agrees to cooperate, wearing a wire cunningly hidden in a pearl necklace, a gift from Victor years ago, now an ironic weapon of retaliation, as if fate is smirking at its own twisted joke. Elena returns to their Upper East Side penthouse, where glass walls overlooking Manhattan's bustling streets once symbolized their shared success, but now serve as the stage for a final showdown. She arranges a meeting with Victor under the guise of wanting to support his escape, her voice trembling yet resolute over the phone, convincing enough to make him believe she's still the dependent, naive wife he always described. When Victor enters, his suit still carrying the scent of expensive cologne from a boardroom meeting, he embraces her mechanically, his eyes scanning the room as if checking for surveillance. Elena, heart pounding beneath the loose dress hiding her baby bump, begins the conversation with subtle probing, feigning admiration for his brilliance in handling the investigation. Victor, his CEO ego swollen like the skyscrapers of Silicon Alley, falls into the trap boasting confidently about funneling $37 million illegally through disguised transactions, from Hayes Tech's investment funds to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, all under the veneer of tax optimization he chuckles at, like an inside joke among Manhattan's elite. Under the pretense of wanting to get through this together, Elena deftly steers the conversation, coaxing Victor to confess more about his indifference to his victims, middle-class investors from Queens or Brooklyn who lost retirement savings, dismissed by him as fools who couldn't handle risk. His voice drips with arrogance, as if addressing shareholders rather than confessing to his wife, and Elena feels a surge of anger mixed with nausea. But she stays composed, her hand unconsciously cradling her belly as if shielding her unborn child from the toxicity unfolding. Victor goes on, revealing his plan to abandon Elena for Madison. She gets my ambition, unlike you, who's only good for charity and shopping. His words cut like a sharp knife, yet carry a dark humor as Elena silently thinks those charity galas might be the only authentic thing in their fabricated life. He laughs loudly, likening his escape to a successful startup, as if financial crime is just another tech venture needing savvy investment. But the real climax hits when the FBI storms Madison's apartment in Brooklyn, a vibrant neighborhood of hipster bars and street graffiti, where Madison thought she was safe with her lover. Elena, watching from afar via Rebecca's phone live stream, sees Victor handcuffed, his face pale as agents uncover $500,000 in cash stuffed in a suitcase and a fake passport under another name, ready for a flight to an island with no extradition treaty. He thrashes, shouting, "This is a misunderstanding!" But his eyes betray the fear of a CEO used to dominating, now powerless like a fired employee. Elena sits alone in the Upper East Side penthouse, hands trembling as she removes the wire, a flood of relief and pain washing over her relief that justice is near. Pain from realizing her 20-year marriage was a gilded cage, where she was trapped by financial dependency and sweet lies. The assets are seized immediately: the penthouse, the Hamptons retreat, the bank accounts, leaving her with a vague fear of the future, especially with a child soon to be born needing a stable home. But in that moment, Elena feels a newfound strength, as if yesterday's slap and today's confession have burned away the facade, revealing the real woman within. The morning Victor was handcuffed and led away from Madison's Brooklyn apartment, Sunlight streamed through the windows of Elena's Upper East Side penthouse, as if heralding the dawn of a new chapter, though it came at the cost of a world once deemed perfect. With Victor facing a 15-year sentence for financial fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to flee prosecution, the FBI seized nearly everything. The lavish penthouse overlooking Manhattan's skyline, the Hamptons beach house with its white sand shores, and bank accounts once brimming with extravagant figures. Elena, now 42 and 5 months pregnant, is left with just $15,000 in a personal checking account and a handful of belongings, designer dresses now like costumes from a play that's ended. But instead of collapsing, Elena feels a breeze of freedom creeping in, as if for the first time in 2 decades, she's allowed to breathe air untainted by Victor's ambitions. She moves to a small apartment in Brooklyn Heights, where cobblestone streets and maple trees offer a warmth far removed from Manhattan's cold skyscrapers. The apartment, with large windows facing New York Harbor, isn't spacious but floods with natural light, as if mirroring an Elena rediscovering herself. With support from her brother Lucas the priest, with a former lawyer's keen mind, now her unofficial legal advisor Elena enrolls in a master's program in social work at New York University. She wants to turn her pain into purpose, much like New Yorkers transform hardship into street art in Williamsburg. Lucas, with his salt and pepper hair and pensive eyes, guides her through legal steps to protect her remaining assets, and their talks at St. Patrick's Cathedral become a balm for her soul, where she learns to forgive herself for living in a gilded cage. Elena begins volunteering at the Women's Financial Independence Center in Brooklyn, a small but passionate organization where women escaping financial abuse rebuild their lives. With her long unused bachelor's degree in social work, Elena quickly becomes a trusted ally for women like Maria, a single mother once living in her car, too scared to leave a controlling husband. She shares her story, not to boast, but to inspire, helping them learn to budget, open personal accounts, and reclaim confidence. Each counseling session is a step forward, not just for them but for Elena, who realizes strength comes not from wealth or status, but from rising after being knocked down, a quintessentially Brooklyn lesson, where resilience trumps glamour. 6 months later, thanks to her cooperation with the FBI, Elena receives $1 million from Victor's recovered assets, not enough to return to her former lavish life, but enough to secure financial stability for her and her unborn child. Instead of buying designer dresses or investing in a new Manhattan apartment, she chooses simplicity, purchasing a worn armchair from a Brooklyn flea market for reading and a local artist's painting for her living room. With a touch of self-deprecating humor, Elena thinks Victor would be shocked to see her choose a $50 chair over an Italian sofa, a small but profound act of rebellion. Her unborn child, now kicking strongly, becomes a new source of strength. Each kick reminds her she's living not just for herself, but for a future demanding courage and authenticity. But the past doesn't let go easily. On sleepless nights, Elena lies awake, hearing distant traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge, wondering if she's truly escaped Victor's shadow. Financial articles in the Wall Street Journal still mention the Hayes tech scandal, and she receives messages from reporters wanting to interview the betrayed wife. She declines, not ready to turn her pain into sensational headlines. Lucas, with a priest's wisdom and a lawyer's sharp insight, reminds her that the past only holds power if she allows it. Elena begins to understand that rebirth isn't about erasing the past, but building a future where she's the author of her own story, a story that doesn't need Manhattan's glitter to shine. 1 year after the fateful slap at Sophia's wedding, Elena stands in the sanctuary of St. Patrick's Cathedral, where shimmering light from stained glass windows paints rainbow patterns on the stone floor, as if fate itself is smiling at her journey of rebirth. Today, she's not the bridesmaid adjusting a silk dress or the dependent wife trembling in Victor's shadow, but a 43-year-old woman, mother to a 3-month-old boy, and a newly minted master's graduate in social work from New York University. The graduation ceremony unfolds in this very sanctuary, where a year ago Sophia's bouquet fell into her hands, not promising marital bliss as tradition suggests, but the courage to shatter her gilded cage and rewrite her own story. Elena, in a simple black dress instead of a costly gala gown, stands among her classmates, feeling pride surge not from Manhattan's high society approval, but from becoming the truest version of herself. The past year has been a whirlwind of loss and renewal. After Victor's 15-year sentence for financial fraud and money laundering, Elena lost the Upper East Side penthouse, the Hamptons beach house, and the Mrs. A's status that once made her a darling of charity galas. But in Brooklyn Heights, in a small apartment with exposed brick walls and the sound of waves from the harbor, she found a simple yet fulfilling life. She became a full-time counselor at the Women's Financial Independence Center, helping dozens of women like Lisa, who once lived in her car, too scared to leave a controlling husband, learn to open bank accounts, budget, and trust their inner strength. Each success story builds Elena's confidence, and her son, named Noah at Lucas's suggestion, becomes a flame warming her heart each night when his cries echo in their modest apartment. But the past still knocks. An unexpected request from Victor, sent through his lawyer, forces Elena to face him one last time at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. Driving rural roads, gripping the wheel of her self-bought Honda Civic, she braces for a meeting she knows won't yield a sincere apology. In the prison's visiting room, under harsh fluorescent light, Victor is no longer the arrogant Silicon Alley CEO. His hair grayer, face gaunt, and prison uniform making him look small, like a minor character in the story he once directed. He tries to manipulate her again, using familiar sweet words, but Elena sees through it, no remorse, only regret for being caught. She refuses to forgive, not out of anger, but because she doesn't need his validation to move forward. The slap at the wedding, she now understands, wasn't an accident, but an opportunity to awaken, to realize true freedom comes not from wealth or status, but from living by her own values. Back in Brooklyn, Elena shares her story through a documentary by filmmaker Jennifer Walsh, aiming to inspire women across America with their inner strength. Filming sessions at the center, where she counsels women escaping financial abuse, become living proof that happiness lies not in penthouses or designer dresses, but in rising after being knocked down. Lucas, her brother, now not just a priest but an advocate for financial reform, testifying before Congress about protecting victims of white-collar crime, smiles as he watches Elena cradle Noah, joking that she's now the queen of Brooklyn Heights, no Manhattan crown needed. His smile carries gentle humor, but also acknowledges she's weathered a storm to find her own sunlight. Standing alone in the sanctuary after the graduation, Elena gazes at the spot where the bouquet once landed in her hands. She realizes it didn't promise marital happiness but the courage to live authentically, a gift more valuable than any bank account Victor ever controlled. Now, she drives home with Noah, sleeping soundly in his car seat, through Brooklyn's vibrant, lamp-lit streets, knowing this real life is what she always craved. Elena smiles, thinking with a touch of humor that if Victor saw her now, he'd be stunned to know she's happier than ever without him. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.